What if the greatest treasures aren't buried in the earth,
but etched in the laugh lines around a pair of knowing eyes? Elias, a young cartographer obsessed with mapping the uncharted corners of the world, found himself at a crossroads, not one marked on any map, but a far more confusing intersection of ambition and purpose. He'd spent his life chasing horizons, seeking the thrill of discovery. But lately, those triumphs felt hollow, like echoes in a vast, empty chamber. His grandfather, Silas, a man who'd spent his life tending a small vineyard nestled in the rolling hills of Tuscany, represented everything Elias thought he wasn't. Grounded, content, seemingly untouched by the wanderlust that burned in Elias's soul, Silas was a man of the earth. His hands gnarled like the vines he cultivated. His wisdom gleaned not from books or faraway lands, but from the rhythm of the seasons, the whisper of the wind through the leaves, the taste of the sun-ripened grapes. Elias had always seen Silas's life as limited, a small circle drawn on a boundless canvas. He pitied the perceived lack of adventure, the absence of grand narratives. But lately, a nagging unease had settled within him, a suspicion that perhaps his own grand adventures were merely distractions, ornate frames around an empty picture. He had come to Tuscany seeking a break from his expeditions, a respite from the clamor of the world. He imagined weeks of quiet contemplation, sketching landscapes, and recharging his weary spirit. Yet, from the moment he arrived, Silas's gentle presence had disrupted his carefully constructed solitude. His grandfather wasn't aloof or intrusive, but simply present, a steady, unwavering beacon in Elias's turbulent sea of self-doubt. One sweltering afternoon, as Elias sat sketching a panoramic view of the vineyard, Silas approached, his weathered face creased with a smile. "Beautiful," he said, his voice raspy with age. "But you're capturing the what, Elias? Not the why." Elias frowned. "What do you mean, grandfather?" Silas gestured to the sprawling vines, heavy with grapes. "You see, these vines, they've been here for generations. They've weathered storms, droughts, infestations. They've seen empires rise and fall. Their roots run deep, drawing sustenance from the very heart of this land. That's the why. That's the story worth telling." Elias pondered his grandfather's words. He'd always been drawn to the exotic, the unknown.
He charted forgotten ruins, mapped unexplored jungles.
But he'd never truly considered the stories that lay beneath his feet, the silent narratives woven into the fabric of everyday life. He'd been so busy chasing the horizon that he'd forgotten to look down. The following days unfolded in a quiet rhythm of shared labor. Elias helped Silas prune the vines, his city, softened hands quickly developing calluses. He learned to identify the subtle signs of disease, to feel the weight of a perfect grape in his palm, to understand the delicate balance between sun and shade, water and soil. During their breaks, Silas would share snippets of his life, stories not of daring exploits or epic journeys, but of quiet perseverance, of small victories won against the relentless forces of nature. He spoke of the year a devastating frost almost wiped out the entire crop, and how the community rallied together, lighting bonfires throughout the night to protect the tender buds. He spoke of the decades-long rivalry with a neighboring vineyard, which eventually dissolved into a deep, unspoken respect. He spoke of his late wife, Laura, her laughter echoing through the vineyard long after she was gone. One evening, as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple, Elias asked, "Grandfather, do you ever regret not seeing the world? Not exploring beyond these hills?" Silas chuckled, a warm rumbling sound. "The world is in these hills, Elias. It's in the changing seasons, in the faces of the people I love, in the taste of the wine we make. I've seen empires rise and fall in the eyes of my children and grandchildren. What more could a man ask for?" Elias remained silent, the weight of his own restless ambition pressing down on him. He realized that he'd been so focused on measuring the world in miles that he'd failed to appreciate its true depth, its hidden complexities. He'd been searching for meaning in faraway lands, while all along it had been growing patiently at his feet in the rich soil of his family's vineyard. The turning point came during the annual grape harvest. The entire village came together, their laughter and chatter filling the air as they worked side by side. Elias, initially awkward and unsure, found himself drawn into the collective energy, his hands moving with a newfound purpose. He wasn't just picking grapes. He was participating in a tradition that stretched back centuries, a ritual that connected him to something larger than himself. He witnessed a moment that pierced through his hardened exterior. Old man Vitali, frail and hunched with age, struggled to reach a cluster of grapes high on the vine. Without a word, a young girl, barely 10 years old, lifted him onto her shoulders, allowing him to complete his task. The gratitude in Vitali's eyes, the pure, unadulterated joy in the girl's face, it was a fleeting moment, but it resonated within Elias like a thunderclap. He realized that true wealth wasn't measured in gold or glory, but in the connections forged between people and shared experiences that bound them together. He understood that the greatest adventures weren't always found on distant shores, but in the simple act of serving others, of contributing to something meaningful, of leaving the world a little brighter than he found it. That night after the harvest feast, Elias sat with Silas under the starlit sky. He confessed his doubts, his fears, his sense of emptiness. He admitted that he'd been wrong about his grandfather, about the value of a life lived in one place. Silas listened patiently, his eyes twinkling in the moonlight. When Elias finished, he simply said, "The path you choose is not as important as the way you walk it, Elias. It's not about where you go, but who you become along the way. True wisdom isn't about accumulating knowledge, but about cultivating compassion, about understanding the interconnectedness of all things." "But I wasted so much time," Elias lamented, "chasing the wrong things." Silas smiled. "Time is never wasted, Elias. Every experience, every mistake, every moment of joy and sorrow, it all shapes us, molds us into who we are meant to be. The past is not a burden to be regretted, but a foundation upon which to build a better future." The following morning, Elias packed his bags, but something had shifted within him. He wasn't leaving Tuscany to chase another horizon, but to return to the world with a newfound sense of purpose. He still intended to explore, to map the uncharted territories, but now he would do so with a different perspective, a deeper appreciation for the stories that lay hidden beneath the surface. He embraced Silas, a warmth spreading through him he'd never felt before. "Thank you, grandfather," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "for showing me the map I needed to see." Silas squeezed his hand. "The greatest maps are not drawn on paper, Elias, but etched in the heart." Elias traveled the world, but now he looked for something deeper. After some time, his expeditions took on a new form. Instead of just mapping landscapes, he started documenting the cultures, traditions, and stories of the people who inhabited those lands. He became a storyteller, sharing his discoveries not just with the scientific community, but with the world. He wrote about the nomadic tribes of Mongolia, their ancient traditions threatened by modernization. He documented the indigenous communities of the Amazon rainforest, their wisdom holding the key to preserving the planet. He shared the stories of ordinary people who had overcome extraordinary challenges, their resilience a testament to the indomitable spirit of humanity. He never forgot his grandfather's vineyard. Every year, during the harvest season, he would return to Tuscany not just to help pick grapes, but to reconnect with his roots, to remind himself of the lessons he had learned. One year, Silas fell ill. Elias rushed to his bedside, fearing the worst. He sat with his grandfather, holding his hand, sharing stories, and reminiscing about the past. As Silas faded, he whispered to Elias, "Remember." "The why, my boy. Remember." The why. Silas passed away peacefully, surrounded by his family. Elias felt a profound sense of loss, but also a deep sense of gratitude. He knew that his grandfather's wisdom, his love, his spirit would live on, not just in his memory, but in the way he lived his life. Elias inherited the vineyard. He decided to leave his life as an explorer, at least for a while. He knew next to nothing about running a vineyard, but he was determined to honor his grandfather's legacy. He poured himself into the work, spending hours learning the intricacies of winemaking, consulting with experienced vintners, and experimenting with new techniques. He studied the history of the vineyard, learning about the generations of families who had toiled their triumphs and tribulations. he discovered a treasure trove of old journals filled with handwritten notes about weather patterns, soil conditions, and grape varietals. He realized that his grandfather hadn't just been tending a vineyard. He had been building upon the knowledge of generations, preserving a legacy of sustainable agriculture. He took a different approach than his grandfather. Elias started a sustainable wine program where he partnered with local communities to help them use the wine to build their own communities. He brought this approach all over the world and taught others about sustainable agriculture and living. Over time, Elias transformed the vineyard into a thriving center for sustainable agriculture, attracting visitors from all over the world who came to learn about the ancient traditions and innovative techniques. He never stopped exploring,
but his explorations now took on a new dimension. He sought not just to map the world,
but to understand it, to connect with it, to preserve it for future generations. And so Elias carried on his grandfather's legacy not by mimicking his life, but by embodying his spirit. He learned that true adventure wasn't about chasing the horizon, but about deepening his roots, about cultivating compassion, about leaving the world a little brighter than he found it. And in doing so, he finally found a map he had been searching for all along, a map etched not on paper,
but on the heart.